All right. How many of you actually know who I am? Ooh, a couple of you. Wow, hello. All right, for those that don't know, that means, yes, I'll have to do a small introduction. For those that do know who I am, just calm down. So my name is Aaron. I think you probably might know that. I'm originally Australian. You might be able to hear the twang in my voice, although I haven't lived in Australia as long as I've lived in Israel. So I lived in Israel for 26 years. Now, what is a good Aussie boy going to go and live in Israel for? You know, the center of the universe. I hear you ask. It's a good question. Well, I didn't hear the voice of heaven that would say, "Get thee to Jerusalem." Some people do hear that. Some people feel the call. That wasn't my experience. I was doing what all good Aussies do. I was running a pub in London. Okay. So apparently, the British are not so good at it, and they bring all the Aussies over, and we do it for you, okay? And we did enjoy it, all right? So I was doing that, and when I finished my year's contract with a big British brewing company called Moreland, doesn't exist anymore, but they did make a beer called Old Speckled Hen. You heard of it? Yeah, there you go. Okay, work for those guys. All right, then I hopped in my VW Rust Bucket camper van. Anyone know the 1973 model? Yep, that all popped up. Okay, and I drove from London to Jerusalem. Now, back then, the year was 1998. So there wasn't an ISIS, there were no borders, there wasn't even a euro yet. Okay, you're driving along and see signs for it, but you still had all the money of every country. And I originally took the ferry from Dover to Calais. Unfortunately, the Frenchies were on strike, so we had to turn around and come back. And then immediately we went to Zeebrugge in Belgium, drove around Europe, all the way down to Morocco, then back up into Europe, and all the way over to Turkey, and then zigzagged through the Greek islands, and eventually took a ferry from Cyprus to Haifa, got off the boat in Haifa, drove off in my van, and I could see the security guards coming up to me, and I thought, okay, that's it, I'm done for. So I'm wearing a Mexican poncho that I picked up in Mexico. I haven't shaved for three months. Okay, I look like a drug dealer. And the Israeli guard looked at me, and he looked at the car, and he said, "What's the purpose of bringing the car into Israel?" And I was so struck by just that simple question, I went, "To drive it." And he went, "Well, you can come in then." I was like, ooh. Okay, different world, okay? They don't do that anymore, all right? So there we are, driving around the Middle East. Now, I was a Christian, I was a believer, but I wanted to go to the Middle East, I wanted to go to Israel, and I wanted to, read the Gospels in situ on the shore of the Galilee. I wanted to go to the Mount of Olives and look at Jerusalem. I wanted to walk around the stones. I wanted to go into the desert and read some stories about our father Abraham. And I did all that. And that's the pilgrim thing to do. It's great. Who's been to Israel? Isn't it great? Yeah. And there really isn't quite another place like it, is it? Now, when I first got to Israel, I was sitting on the Mount of Olives and I was looking at Jerusalem, and I thought, man, this is a dry, dusty, dirty city full of hate. No one gets along. Why would you like this city, Lord? There's much better cities in the world than this. I'd been around the world. I'd been to, all across Canada, Vancouver, wow, Boston, New York. I mean, some great cities. London, ever heard of that one? Great cities. Well, it was. But then, I was sitting on the Mount of Olives at night, and the sun came up, and it hit those golden stones, and you went, wow, I get it. There's something about this place. So, I was camping at the Dead Sea. Anyone been to the Dead Sea? Yep, lowest point on earth. You can still stand up and breathe. And when you finish floating and bobbing, which people do, you hop in your tour buses and they go to the hotels. And then people who are left, there's people camping on the Dead Sea, lots of them. Tourists, Israelis, all kinds of people who broke their cars. Everybody's hanging out there, and all of a sudden, the Arabs spontaneously generate from out of the rock in these big family groups. And it's like 30, 40, 50, and they're all along the shore of the Dead Sea. And they're bringing their little mangalim, little barbecues and food and things. And in typical Middle Eastern hospitality. Now, the Middle East is all about food. You're always inviting people into your house. Because there's a tradition, right? Well, first of all, the tradition comes from Abraham. Abraham is the father, right, of both the Arabs and the Jews, as they will say. And who did he invite into his tent? Angels. And so both in Hebrew, in Jewish, and in Arabic tradition, when you invite strangers into your home, you might be entertaining angels. And so there's this big tradition of just meet strangers and say, hello, don't even tell me your name, St. Michael. You can please come into my house and have food. Okay, and so these Arabs came up to me and they said, come eat with me, my family, good family. Don't eat with other family, horrible family. You with me? And I ate some obscure animal, and I got horribly sick. Now, I'd been to Mexico, I ate everything in Mexico. I ate out of the wall, drank all the water, nothing. Okay, I ate all the dodgy stuff you've been to in Turkey, nothing. Portugal, nothing. Morocco, nothing. Get to Israel, it's the great white throne judgment. Okay? You've heard of that judgment, haven't you? Revelation 21, thou shalt be close to a toilet at all possible times. Okay, full stop. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is really bad. And by the way, it's a great weight loss program, just so you know. Okay, people always like, how do I lose weight? I'll tell you. I was looking through my Lonely Planets guidebook, because that's how I got around Europe. Back then, those things were called books. Remember them? Yeah, I actually had one of them. And the Lonely Planets guidebook to Israel and the Palestinian territories says that when you get to the middle pages, there's an advert for Christ Church, Jerusalem. And it says, nice gardens, clean toilets. So I might go there. So I went there and I sat in the courtyard for 5 days waiting for the bug to go through. And in that time, I encountered a community of Jews who believe in Jesus, and Arabs who believe in Jesus, and Gentiles from all walks did you pick a denomination? They were there. And we were all working together, praying together, worshiping together, and in some cases, they were even marrying each other. Right? And I thought, wow, who are you people? Because normally, Arabs and Jews, right? And here it was the complete opposite. I was like, wow, who are you? So then they told me the history of this Anglican mission called CMJ. Who's heard of CMJ? Okay, not a few people. That's great. Well, I'd never heard of it. I was going, an Anglican mission? Really? I worshipped for a year in Holy Trinity, Brompton. Never heard of you guys. Okay? And so they told me this incredible story that over 200 years ago, a group of Christians picked up their Bible and started to read it, and they went, oh my gosh, Jesus isn't coming back to Paris or to London, as nice as those cities might be. Where's Jesus going to come back to? Right. And what has to happen before Jesus comes back? The return of the Jews. All of the prophets talk about a return from Galut, a return from exile, that God was going to fulfill his covenant. You know, every covenant in the Bible actually has something to do with land. Even the new covenant. Like, ooh, you better prove that one, Sonny Jim. All right. Well, most of us read Jeremiah 31:31, and it says that I'm going to make a new covenant with the house of Israel. And sometimes then the people stand up and go, Israel's the church. And the house of Judah. Gotcha. Okay. And then it talks, I'm going to write the Torah on your hearts. Okay, this teaches us that the Torah does not disappear. Otherwise, what's written on your heart? Nothing. All right? But God says, I'm going to write my Torah, not my law, bad translation. Okay, anyone know the Hebrew word for law? Chok. And the Torah comes from the verb lehorot, which means to teach, to guide, and to instruct. Now, inside the Torah, there are chokim, laws. That is true, right? But the Torah itself means teaching, guidance, instruction. Why do we write law then? I hear you ask. You guys ask a lot of questions. And that's good, by the way. That's a very Jewish thing to do. We get it from the Septuagint, because the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Hebrew, which Jewish people wrote a couple hundred years prior to Jesus, and they use the word nomos, which is the word for law. Why they did, I don't know. They're all dead. I can't ask them. But we've been running that way ever since. But Torah, in Hebrew, is teaching, guidance, and instruction. Now, if God teaches, guides, and instructs, it must be, by definition, good, yes? I mean, God wouldn't give you I'm going to teach you how to drive, Aaron, and there's a wall, go really, really fast. Whack, ha, ha, ha. Okay? That wouldn't happen, right? The teaching and guidance and instructions of the Lord will be for our benefit. And when you read, I think the first 5 books are absolutely amazing. Leviticus in particular, my favorite book. Okay? It gives you a frame. It gives you the basis for all of human flourishing. God gets his people in front of him at Mount Sinai. And not just his people, well, he does actually, he gets all of his people. Who left Egypt? Who came out of Egypt? When God reached down with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and he took out who? Okay, here's the Jews, the Hebrews. Who else? A mixed multitude. So who was involved in Passover? Jews and? Who stood at Mount Sinai? Jews and? Who wandered through the wilderness? Jews and? Right, all of us. That's why when Paul finally got the revelation, he writes, oh my gosh, we should, Jews and Gentiles should be together. We got to get the one new man together. That's the way it's always meant to be. And people who try and keep separating that stuff, bad idea. All right. So God gives his teaching, his guidance and instruction to his people, and he says, this is everything I have here is for your flourishing. This is how you treat the land. This is how you treat your animals. This is how you treat women. This is how you go to war. This is how you do international politics. This is how you do the temple. This is how you worship. You pick it. This is what you can eat. Okay? There's all that is in there. And to throw it away means that you create a society with no frame, a society with no base. And we become lawless. That's a really bad place to be. Particularly when God says, I'm going to write it on your heart. And I'm going to forgive you. Okay, that's Jeremiah 31. In the Bible, of course, there are no chapters. That is a late edition. Does anyone know how late? The Middle Ages, right? And so Jeremiah 31 rolls into Jeremiah 32. And Jeremiah 32, 39, 40, and 41 talks about an everlasting covenant. Which one is that, I hear you ask? It's the new covenant. And in Jeremiah 32, 41, God says the only time in the Bible that you will hear these words, my heart and my soul. God says, I will give them an everlasting covenant, and I will put them in their land. And I will do this with all my heart and all my soul. And you go, wow, that's really special. All right. So, here I am in Jerusalem. I've heard of this incredible mission. Heard of these people who've been reading the Bible, sent out missionaries wherever you find Jews, ended up in Jerusalem, established an incredible work, which is still there. And the local priest, a guy called Ray Lockhart, asked and said, Aaron, would you please come and volunteer with us? Not my plan. I was going to drive my little VW camper van all the way back to England, where I was going to get another job in a pub. And so I leant forward to say, no thanks, I'll be fine. And out came, yeah, sure, I'll stay. I was like, okay, it wasn't until only a couple of years ago, actually, that I was reading a proverb, and it says, man guards his heart, and the Lord guards his lips. And you're like, oh, sneaky. So anyway, I started as a volunteer. I went to Hebrew University, where I studied early Jewish and Christian interpretation of the Bible. What is that, I hear you ask? That's where I studied how Jews and Christians interpreted the scriptures between the years 300 and 300. So in that 600-year window, we didn't have a Bible. We're still arguing which books are in, which books are out. All right? And so how are you interpreting these texts? Until finally we decide which books are in, and then the canon is sort of codified, so to speak. It's the exciting period. Well, I think it is. It's the first century Jewish period. It's the period of Jesus, and so that kind of thing. So I got stuck into that, learned to speak Hebrew, and I lived in Jerusalem for 26 years. Now, when you turn the TV on, you will probably see bad news, won't you? Always bad. Does anyone see any good news? Don't say it's because Aston Villa lost, okay? That's not fair. Okay. GB News. Okay, we've got one. We've got one. Right. Well, when I first went to Israel in 1998, they took a census in the land of the number of Jewish believers. And they counted somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000. Okay, Jews who believe in Jesus. 1998. Like, oh, pretty small. Okay. In 2021, they did another census. So 20 years later, the number had grown to 30 to 35,000. It's like, ooh. So we had watched and participated in and assisted in the growth of the Jewish church, the Jewish believers, the Messianics, grow 5 times. That's really good news. You will never hear that on TV. So people go, oh, it's always bad, it's always horrible. And I lived there during the bus bombings. I lived there during the various wars with Hezbollah. I lived there in Gaza. I was there on October the 7th. My son was born in a small town. Probably haven't heard of it. Bethlehem. Oh, you have heard of it. Does anyone know anybody famous born in Bethlehem? Okay. Well, now you know too. Okay. So there's Yeshua, Jesus, and Micah. And so he was born in Bethlehem. But because he was born in Israel, guess what he has to do when he hits 18? Right. And we always taught him to Micah, you must always accept a challenge. So when he went to the IDF, he did the normal basic training. And then the commanders come and they say, Micah, we want people to become special forces. Who wants to give it a go? So he puts his hand up. So what they do is they take all these kids out, because they're all kids, right? They're all girls and guys, kids. And they're Arabs and Jews and Gentiles. The IDF, something I learned when I was in Israel, the IDF is probably the most neutral, DEI, whatever you want to call it, army out there. They do not care if you're Arab or Jewish, religious or secular. They don't care if you're male or female. You know what they care about? Are you a good soldier or not? And if you're good, you will get a promotion. If you're not, they'll be shown the door. And so Micah fought with Muslims. Okay? He fought with Christians and he fought with Jews. And they made these kids crawl in the desert on their, elbows and knees, and they, beat them and did all kinds of stuff until one by one they all leave. And whoever was left at the end of a week, they said, you guys are special forces. We'll go and take you to another base. We'll train you up. And so Micah was actually in the army on October the 7th. So he was home for Shabbat. And we had a great meal Friday night. When your kid comes home from the army, which happens about once a month, everyone's really excited. You get all the friends over. You have a big barbecue. Lots of prayers and blessings and all that kind of stuff. And probably a little too much to drink. Good Shabbat wine. And then in the morning we woke up and it was horrible. And so I remember all the uncertainty and the confusion, all the terror, all of it. And I went downstairs and Micah, and I said, Micah, get up, call your commander. Something horrible has happened and no one knows what's going on. I mean, by this stage, rockets were going off and sirens were going. In Israel, when a siren goes off, some people run into the bomb shelters, and other people hop onto their roofs. And they get their phones out, and they do this. Okay? Guess which one of those I am? Okay? So when the Iranians fired their missiles at us, okay, this is what it was like in Israel. At 11 o'clock, you got a text. Everyone got a text on their phone. Said the Iranians have fired 300 ballistic missiles at us. They will arrive in approximately 3 hours. You're like, oh, okay. So you set your alarm for 2 o'clock, and then you go to bed. Then you wake up, and then you hear the alarm, and you go, oh man, I said that wrong. And you hear this, you're like, oh, that's right. So you go outside, and you're like, wow, you just see Star Wars happening. And you just sit there and that is amazing. Other people are running and screaming, and they're like, yeah, no, it's fine, it's fine. Do not do what I do. Okay. Anyway, so Micah had to call his commander, who said that he was fighting in Yad Mordechai, which is a little kibbutz just north of Gaza, and they make honey there, really good honey. And the commander said, come to the front. So we had to, it was the Sabbath. It was actually Simchat Torah. It was the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. So we had our meal in our big sukkah. And we were walking up the road, because there's no public transport. So we were driving to where the taxis are, and these Orthodox were coming out. Because the Orthodox aren't allowed to read the news, right? They can't turn the TV on. They're like, what's going on? What's going on? They've heard of something, but they don't know what it is. And Micah said, Milchama, we're at war. And then you see these Orthodox start praying for a little believer, a little Christian, who goes off to go and fight. And then he went, and it was an Arab, as you would have guessed, right? How's that for irony? Christian is driven by an Arab Muslim to go fight for Israel. And we didn't hear about him for the first 50 days because they got to be in a zone, right? So I know all of those fears and thoughts, but that's because he was born in Bethlehem. And his birth certificate's Palestinian. So I got 2 daughters, and they're born in Jerusalem. So their birth certificate is Israel. So I always like to joke and say I've got 1 Palestinian and 2 Israelis. And I've built a big wall down the middle of the house. And then everybody's happy. No, they get on really, really well. Anyway, so during that time, even during the war, right, and it was a mess, everybody talked about God. Have you heard of the expression, there are no atheists in foxholes? That is true. So when you hopped on a bus, everybody was talking about God, right? Everybody was nervous. Everybody was unsure. Everybody didn't know. Everybody just, what is going on in life? And all you had to do was open your mouth and say the truth. And people listened. And so again, when other people turn the TV on and go, oh, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. Some of us who live there were going, wow, Lord, I'm ready, right? So when times do get tough, what do the heroes of God have to do? They have to get ready. They have to stand up and be counted. Does anyone remember the Gulf War of 1991? Saddam Hussein shot something like, 20 to 30 rockets at Israel. You know what was really bad about that? Not that he shot rockets. It was the fact that 90% of all Christian missionaries left. Their mission societies called them home. And they said yes. What kind of a witness is that? Believe in Jesus. When the going gets tough, I'm out of here. That is wrong. In fact, when someone's suffering, what do you need to do? Yes. When someone's crying, what do? You cry with them. When someone's laughing, you laugh with them. When they're hungry, you feed them. It's not rocket science. Jesus tells us to do this. So basic The Lord tells us to do it in the Torah, so basic. And yet we're often so caught up by fear. Fear is the thing that stops the gospel. Nothing else. Right? Jesus got his disciples and he said, go to the ends of the world. Right? Does anyone know what today is in the Christian calendar? There's lots of calendars out there, right? It's Ascension Day. Today is 40 days after Passover. 40 days after Passover, Jesus took his disciples and says, you wait here in 10 days for the feast of Shavuot. You're going to get a special gift. Don't leave. And when you get that gift, you go from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria and to the ends of the earth. Right? So this is the day that's commemorated. And so it did. You can go anywhere in the world and you'll find believers. And could Satan stop the gospel going around the world? No, he could not. So he's not that strong, is he? So he might be a roaring lion, but he's not something you can't beat. And so God is always looking for heroes, so stay strong. Anyway, that's actually not the message. The message is, one of my favorite topics, is how to read the Bible from a Jewish perspective. Now, in the ancient world, you didn't read your Bible. Why not? You didn't have one. Okay? I mean, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? I mean, the Bible is today the best-selling book in human history. Right? There's over 6 billion copies sold. Not just made and given out for free. So whenever they do that Times list of the bestsellers for the year, they never include the Bible. Why not? Because it would win every single year. Right? You just can't beat this thing. I bet every one of you has probably got 3 or 4 Bibles at home. Is that true? Yeah, okay, don't ask how many. It's insane. But we love them. We treasure them. Some of them come with pictures, some of them come with footnotes, some of them come with words in red, some of them come with interlinear Greek or Hebrew. It's fantastic. That's what we got. 2,000 years ago, they didn't have that. They didn't have a Bible. So you didn't read the scriptures. What you would do is you would go to a Beit Knesset, you go to a house of assembly, and someone would stand up with the scroll, and he would read. And everybody else would? I'd hear, yeah. And that's, you would hear the Bible. And so the words you hear are incredibly important. In fact, the word hear, Shema, is incredibly important. So the first thing we did when we gathered, we said the Shema, which comes from the book of Deuteronomy. And the word Shema means to hear. That is true. It is also the word for obey. Because Hebrew is a language that is word deficient. What do I mean by that? It means it doesn't have as many words as other languages do. And so one word means multiple things. It means that when you read the Bible, things jump out at you at lots of different angles, which makes it really hard to translate. That's why some people ask, which is the best translation? Hebrew. Okay, you're just not gonna, it's just, sorry guys, you're just not gonna get one translation that's the best. It's good to have multiple versions when you go and study. It really is. Tell someone bring a King James, someone bring an NIV, someone bring a RSV, someone bring an ESV, someone just bring something. Okay, we might skip the Message and the Passion, is that okay? Okay, they're a bit too free-form. But everybody else, okay, has had a good go. And then when you encounter a difference, then go, wow, what's going on here? Right? I did an entire seminar paper based on one Greek preposition, and I don't understand Greek. But what I did know is that 13 different versions all translate the verse differently. And so my paper was a 32-page discussion on why. And so there you go. Anyway, that's off to the side. But let's go back to the topic, hearing the Bible. What do we call the Bible? The Word, the King James. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I remember the St. James Bible. He wasn't a saint. King James. We call it the Holy Bible, don't we? Do you know why we call it the Holy Bible? Because that's what's written on the front cover. Okay? If the front cover said the Chronicles of Narnia, what would we call the Bible? Chronicles of Narnia. We had to give it something. Do you know what the Jewish people call it? They call it the Tanakh, yes, but that's just a description of what it is. Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. They call it divine language. Right? So God is divine, and he is holy. Everything about him, anything connected to him, is holy. His name is holy, his people are holy, his land is holy, his word is holy. Everything about him is holy. His presence, etc., etc. He even says, I am holy, so you be holy. But when God speaks, the words themselves must therefore be by default divine. And there is no such thing as a superfluous divine word. The Bible doesn't contain words that shouldn't be there. Right? It doesn't say, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, yeah man. Right? There's no point saying that. That would be superfluous. So, the Jewish people, when they hear, they're used to hearing the text. And so the words that you hear are important. The sounds of the words that you hear are important. And so are the words you don't hear. They're just as important. In fact, sometimes they're even more important. Whoa, how do you get that one? So, before we go back to that question, what letter does the Bible begin with in Hebrew? Does not? Someone said Aleph? But it's Bet, isn't it? Bereshit. But for the people that said Aleph, that's a very Jewish question. The rabbis get together, well, actually the sages, before there were rabbis. Rabbis only start at the time period of Jesus. Prior to Jesus, there's no one called a rabbi. Right? And they're so new at the time of Jesus that when Jesus goes around, he doesn't meet one other rabbi. When Paul goes around in the book of Acts, he doesn't meet one rabbi. Right? They're so new. Okay? So prior to that, just call them the sages. Well, the sages were getting together and they're saying the Bible should start with an Aleph. It's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The Psalms are acrostics. That means they start with Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. Why can't the Bible do that? And so they go, well, it does. You just can't see it. So they'll get a Torah scroll out, and they'll go, see these black words? That's the letter of the Torah. What are they written on? They're written on white words. The ones you can't see. That's the spirit of the Torah. And they go, which one's more important? Spirit of the Torah. Right? The words you can't see. The things that aren't there. So they're looking for words that are not there that we think should be there. I'll give you an example. So those that heard me last night. Okay. Hebrews 5, verse 9. Don't look it up. This is hearing the Bible. Finish the following sentence. Jesus has become the source of eternal salvation to everyone who... Awesome. She's laughing. Now, I've gone around the world. China, Singapore, Hong Kong, Canada, America, don't worry, Australia, everybody says the same thing. We all say believe. The actual word is obey. Now, what is it about us that we are all, doesn't matter where you are in the world, we are so conditioned to finish that sentence with believe. But imagine if someone read it and said, to all who obey, and then you go, Aaron, you read that wrong, sir. The word is believe. We know it's believe. Everybody here says believe. You go, okay, let me just double check. No, it's obey. Now you've got to sit back and wrestle because you've heard something you weren't expecting. And so you go, okay, what does it mean to obey? Is this works righteousness? Are you telling me, Aaron, it's works righteousness? Here are some other words of Jesus. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? Okay. Blessed is he who hears my words and... Yeah. So suddenly we get this idea of there is this idea of obedience. So you wrestle with that. So the idea of hearing the Bible becomes incredibly important. So I'd like to just share a passage where there's a word that's not in the text, but that jumps out and starts a whole piece of theology, which you then see in the New Testament. And it's in Genesis 22. Now, everybody knows Genesis 22, don't you? Right? That's the sacrifice of Isaac. So that's the piece of literature that's read every single Rosh Hashanah. Okay, when the Jewish people start the new year, you start by reading about the sacrifice of Isaac. So, it says, after these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. And then he said, take your son, your only son, Isaac. What's the problem with that sentence? He's got another son. Take your son, your only son. I've got another son. Ishmael. Why can't I take him? Oh, it might be because he kicked him out. But anyway, wait a second. Okay. Take your son Isaac, whom you love. And you hear the word love for the very first time in the Bible. So when words first appear in the text, that their context will always give that word a nuance, a meaning, and it's inseparable from its context. So the first time you ever hear the word ahava in Hebrew, love, right here. Abraham doesn't say he even loves Sarah. Adam doesn't say he loves Eve. Cain certainly doesn't love Abel. Okay? But there's no one saying I love you. And God says, take your son whom you love. So this love now appears in the context of Father, Son, yes? Sacrifice. So love is now in the context of sacrifice. Love is not something you get. Love is something you give. And then you hear it, don't you? For God so loved the world, He didn't demand. He didn't request. He gave. And so here you have this idea of take your son whom you love and go to the land of Moriah, to the land of Moriah. Why not do it here? Why do I have to go there? Offer your son. Okay, he's right here. I'll just go nail him to a tree or something. Okay, but place is incredibly important to God. It does not say why. But God has a thing about place. Now we often in the church, we have a sort of reticence about place, especially replacement theology. Right? God doesn't do special people, doesn't do special lands, doesn't do special buildings or special mountains. And when you read the Bible, you suddenly realize, actually, yes, He does. And what is it about Moriah that's so special, I hear you ask? Well, where is Moriah? Jerusalem, the Temple Mountain. What's the Temple Mountain famous for? The temple. Why would God build His temple there? What's it sitting on top of? Anyone know that special rock that's there? The foundation stone of the world, the Even HaShtiyah. According to Jewish tradition, that's this rock where creation starts. That's why God's going to put His temple there. Where the beginning started, that's where the ending finishes. See, beginnings and ends occur in the same place, or in the same pattern, or in the same way, or on the same day, or things like that. Right? At the beginning, God makes a garden. In it, He puts the tree of life. When heaven and earth meet, when New Jerusalem comes down, what's in the middle of it? Tree of life, right? Back in the same place where it was. Where's the Garden of Eden, according to Jewish tradition? It's Jerusalem. Yeah. I know, Wikipedia says it's somewhere in Iraq. But you know, Saint Wikipedia and Saint Google, patron saints of misinformation, you got to watch out for them. So, in the book of Genesis, there are 4 rivers that come out of the garden. Okay? And they're all named, right? Tigris, Euphrates, which are not rivers based by springs. They're fed by water from a mountain, which means that they change shape over time. If the waters dry up and rain somewhere else, it'll flow somewhere else, especially after a giant flood. But you have a spring in Jerusalem, which is the Gihon spring, which is the other river that comes out of the garden. And that's still in Jerusalem, because the spring doesn't move. That hole in the rock just stays that hole in the rock. And so Jewish tradition, that's the garden. So in the garden, a virgin heard the voice of God and disobeyed. So how are we going to fix the problem? A virgin will hear the voice of God and obey. Israel was meant to be a light to the nations. First king of our nation to give light to the Gentiles was which king? Saul, from the tribe of Benjamin. Out of the apostles, which apostle is going to be the apostle to the Gentiles, to the nations? His name is? Whose real name is? Saul, from the tribe of Benjamin. Okay? Beginnings and endings are constantly in flow. And so Moriah is a place that's very, very important. Well, Abraham gets up to obey. He goes off to this mountain, and when he wants to go up it, he tells his servants, you stay here, me and the lad will go. And as they go up, Isaac turns to his father and says, "Yeah, Dad, Abba, I see the fire, I see the knife, and I'm carrying the wood, but I don't see the sacrifice." And in Hebrew, it says, I don't see the olah. Where's the olah? An olah is what we call in English the burnt offering. Okay, it's the sacrifice, the only sacrifice where everything's given and burnt up to God. Every other sacrifice you get to partake in. Right? You eat your own sacrifice. Right? This tradition that we have in the church, where we gather and we eat and drink, taste and see how good God is, very Jewish thing. Okay, coming in and eating and drinking in the presence of the Lord and with each other. So, where's the olah? Abraham turns to Isaac and says, God will provide a lamb. God will provide a say. Doesn't say olah. So we're going, God will provide a say? Okay. Not an olah? You want to read that one again for me, Aaron? Yep. God will provide a say. Excellent. Then, while no one's looking, we bind up the kid and we get ready to kill him. Okay? And because it would have been a shock, right? It's like, wait, slow down there. Okay, so now Abraham looks up and God provides a ram, an ayil. So Isaac says, where's the olah? Abraham says, God will provide a say, and then he didn't. He provided an ayil. But Abraham said, God will provide a lamb. And so since Genesis 22, what are the Jewish people waiting for? Lamb. The Lamb of God. And so when John the Baptist sees Jesus, and he goes, behold, the Lamb of God, the disciples don't go, really? Said he was a door. Okay. It's fine. I mean, vine, door, lamp, okay, whatever. Okay? But what do they do when they hear the word, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world? Andrew goes to his brother and says, we have found the Messiah. And you go, wow, that's pretty quick. Right? That's not bad. So they've already begun to put those connections with the idea of the Redeemer, the sacrifice, the noble one. Who's the real hero in the Abraham-Isaac story? Yeah. Do you know how old Isaac is? 13? 30? Okay, so in the Bible, when Sarah has Isaac, do you know how old she is? She's 90. Okay? Off you go, ladies. Give it a go. And then, straight after this event, straight after chapter 22 is 23, okay, rocket science, but he comes down from the mountain, and then the next sentence, remember, there are no chapter breaks in the Bible. The very next sentence is, and Sarah died. And she dies at 127. So how old is Isaac? 37. So he is strong. He is fit. He could easily fight back against his dad. He willingly chooses to do his father's will. You see the theology that's packed in this? Now, I'm going to share a midrash for you. What is a midrash, I hear you ask? Excellent. A midrash is a Jewish teaching device, which is a story that is not true, but it tells a story. It tells the truth. The story itself is not true. It tells a truth. Okay? We call those sermons, right? But the Jewish people call that a midrash. Now the midrash is this. In the actual text, in Genesis 22, Abraham ties up the kid, and as he's about to kill, a voice comes out of heaven. And what does the voice say? Stop. It actually says, Abraham, don't kill your son. And it says it twice. Now there are no superfluous words in the Bible. So people are hearing, Abraham, don't kill your son. Abraham, don't kill your son. What would you assume is going on? Why would the angel have to say that twice? Okay, Abraham's deaf. I get it. Okay, he's an old man by this stage. You know, Abraham, don't kill your son. What? You know, there's a midrash. Midrash is not true. It tells the truth. There's a tradition, a midrash that says Abraham actually kills Isaac. Right? Because why? Because he was told to. He kills Isaac. Was Abraham supposed to kill Isaac? No. So what does God do? Raises him back from the dead. Now Abraham sees his son raised back from the dead. But God told him to kill Isaac. So what does he do? Tries to kill him again. Okay? And he's like, oh, that's not supposed to happen. You know? And then the angel's like, no, really, seriously, we could do this all day. Okay? Yeah. But don't kill your son. Now, it's a midrash, which means, do Jewish people actually think Abraham killed Isaac? No. What they're doing is they're looking at the text going, why does it say twice this? And so now we have this idea. Love is connected with sacrifice. It's something you give away. We're waiting for this lamb that's going to be the Lamb of God, and it might die and resurrect. You're right. So that is where this sort of idea comes in. And it's all based around a word that's not there. It's all based around a word, one word, say, that just it didn't appear. An ayil appeared. And so when Jewish people read the Bible, they don't read it, they hear it. Faith comes by? Right, that's Romans. And so that's the context for that idea. And so we are in the tradition of reading the Bible, and that's great. In fact, we've got a tradition out there now in our modern world, no one wants to read anything, which is really sad. But in the ancient world, they were hearers as well as readers. And so we need to try and get into that tradition as well. Get to the stage where we want to hear things. And when we hear things wrong, wrestle with them and get involved. All right. If we turn to the New Testament, let's go to, actually I'll just, to Luke chapter 4. So in Luke chapter 4, we have Jesus go into the synagogue. Right? He's had his time in the desert. So after Jesus gets the baptism, the Spirit pushes him into the desert. Why? Why does Jesus have to go to the desert? What's in the desert? The desert is a very sad, lonely place, isn't it? It's a place where, actually, in the Bible, the book, in fact, the book that everybody's in the Jewish world are reading right now is the book of Numbers. They've just started it, actually, this week. And the book of Numbers in Hebrew isn't called Numbers. Does anyone know what it's called? Bamidbar, which means in the desert. Right? And it comes from the verb, the word midbar is the same word, medaber, which means to speak. Where does God speak to his heroes? In the desert. The desert where it's dangerous, it's dry, there's no food, there's no water, there's bandits. It's also a place where there's no distractions. It's a place without time. It's a place without place. And so when God gets us to a place without distractions and all the other voices of the world are gone, he says, I'm ready to talk to you. You're ready to actually hear me. So everybody goes into the desert. Okay, Israel goes into the desert. Moses goes into the desert. Elijah goes into the desert. David goes into the desert. Jesus goes into the desert. And the desert was also known in Jewish tradition as the abode of demons. So whenever they did a demon slaying, that's where they'll dump them. And in the New Testament, you hear this expression of a guy who had a demon, and then when he went out, where did it go? It went to a dry place. And then it came back and brought some friends. Okay, and so when Jesus goes into the desert, he encounters the enemy, but he also is also hearing from his Father. Well, when he's had his experience, and just remember, when the devil encounters Jesus in the wilderness, it's the first time he's ever met Jesus in flesh. He's never seen Jesus like this before. He's seen Jesus before in heaven. Right? So what's one of the first questions that Satan asks of Jesus? If you are the Son of God. Now, if they'd met before, that's a very stupid question, isn't it? Because in heaven he was the Son of God. Now on earth, right, that would be a really dumb question. If you are, Jesus could have gone, dude, you know me, man. I mean, I was like, really, seriously, you came down to earth and got stupid? Right? No, Satan hasn't met Jesus like this before. Right? He is not omnipotent. He can only be in one place at one time. If Satan knew where Jesus was in Nazareth, what do you think he would have done? Right? It's the baptism announces to the world who Jesus is, and it's also the flare for Satan. So they coalesce in the wilderness. But Jesus beats him, goes to the synagogue, takes up the scroll of Isaiah, and he's going to read. And everybody else is sitting and listening. And so Jesus reads. And you probably know, he reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty to those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." What's the problem with what he just read to what's actually in Isaiah 61? He misses an entire sentence. In Isaiah 61, it says, "I've come to bind up the brokenhearted." Jesus doesn't read that bit. Okay? Why not? Why does Jesus not say, "I have come to bind up the brokenhearted"? We'll get to that question in a minute. So, often around the world as I've spoken, some people will challenge me, particularly secular people. They'll say, Jesus can't be the Messiah. He never claimed to be the Messiah. And I'll come back. Actually, he did. And he did it, the first thing he did coming out of the desert. It's what you hear that's really, really important. And what you don't hear. Okay, so let me just flip to Hebrew so I can read it out. So Isaiah 61 in Hebrew is this. So Jesus would have sat down, or actually stood up. You stand up to read, you sit down to teach. I'm breaking all the rules. It says, Ruach Adonai alai. The Spirit of the Lord is on me. Then there's this word, ya'an, which we translate as because. It's not the word because. The word because in Hebrew is ki. Ya'an is actually an idiom. It's a thing that means sit up, pay attention, because the very next sentence is horribly important. Okay? School teachers still use this to this day in Israel. So if you're teaching, say you're teaching math, and all the crowd are being noisy, and on their internet, on the phone, and no one's behaving, but you're writing out, this is the key formula, you better know this to pass your exams. And the teacher will say, Ya'an! And everyone's like, ooh. Okay, and they'll teach this, everybody writes it down, and then they'll start ignoring her again. Okay, but Ya'an, sit up, pay attention, because the very next sentence is horribly important. And it says, Mashach Adonai oti. Mashach is from the verb lamashiach, which means to make a Messiah, or in English, to anoint. So we translate as anoint, and we've forgotten to hear what everybody else is hearing. Adonai, God. Mashachoti, the Lord has made me the Messiah. Jesus sits down and he says, today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. So Jesus says, I am the Messiah. And people are like, ooh, great. What type of Messiah? And he says, I'm going to preach the good news to the poor. I'm going to open up the eyes of the blind. I'm going to set the captives free. I'm going to do all these wonderful things. That's the type of Messiah I am. But he missed something. He doesn't say, I've come to bind up the brokenhearted. Why not? He doesn't say it. So now we need to wrestle. We need to wrestle with the text. You can't say to Jesus, hey, go back and read that again. Okay? I know you were nervous. You skipped the line. I get it. In Matthew 5, Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. So one would assume that making peace is a really good thing, isn't it? It's a good thing. It is a good thing. I'll just let you know. Okay? Unfortunately, Jeremiah 6 also says, peace, peace, but there will be no peace. It's like, okay, so we've got nice tension. Typical classical Hebrew tension. Blessed are the peacemakers, but there won't be any peace. Better keep trying to make peace. Okay. Then Jesus comes along in Matthew 10 and says, I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring a sword. Like, ooh. Because the fathers are going to be against the sons, and the sons will be against the fathers, and the mothers will be against their daughters, the daughters will be against their mothers, and the mother-in-laws will be against, the lady down the street or something. But what it means is, believing in the Messiah is going to hurt. And that happens. If you're a Muslim and you come to faith in Jesus, what happens? That hurts. Dad doesn't go, oh, I am so proud that my son has become a Christian. Instead, it's like, I will kill him. Right? And you go, wow. Now, if you're Jewish and you come to faith in Jesus, they don't kill you. Okay? You're banished. Right? When I first went to Israel in 1998, I was walking around the old city, heading down to the wall, because I was going to pray. The wall is a great place to pray. Place, really important. Okay? There's a spot on the planet where God says, my eyes and my heart are always there. Right? That's in Chronicles, when Solomon is dedicating the temple, and he says literally like this, how do you fit in this box? Right? The universe can't contain you. How do you fit in the box I built? And that's what he calls it. And then God says, my eyes and my heart are always here. So if there's one spot on the planet that you say, I need God to pay attention to me now, go there. Anyway, as I'm walking down the road, I see signs, little A4 sheets of paper. It's got a little Jewish man with a white beard. And I find out later he used to be one of the rabbis at the wall. They have rabbis at the wall. when you go and pray. It's man, 24/7. I've prayed there at like 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes, right? And people will come. They'll just walk up to you and they go, hey, do you want me to pray with you? Sure. Grab a prayer book. You want to go through some of the Psalms together or something? And so these rabbis have, encountered Christians for a very long time. And some of them, drop by drop by drop, come to faith in Jesus. And this one did. But it now said, cross equals Nazi swastika. And it said in Hebrew, this man is dead. You can't take him into your house. You can't give him a job. His wife divorced him. His kids won't talk to him. He lost everything overnight. So he loses everything. Who needs to become his new family? We do. So in Israel, it's like this. Okay, you come to faith in Yeshua, and your dad won't invite you for Passover anymore. So I've got to say, you come into my house. My wife's a great cook. Your dad won't build you a sukkah. I'll build you one. We'll celebrate together. You have to become the new family. And so Jesus says, I haven't come to bind up the brokenhearted. Who's going to do that? Right. But that word isn't there. And it's a really important word. And so sometimes the things that aren't in the Bible happen to be incredibly important. And the way you learn what's not there is learning to hear and trying to think, what should be there? I heard that wrong. Now, we've lost that ability, okay, but it's still there in the Jewish tradition. Because in the Jewish tradition, you still have the guy get up and read, and usually most of the congregation doesn't follow along with their Bible. They usually pay attention. Not always. But I'll open it up to questions now, if you would like. We've got another half an hour if you would like some questions. Or I can just keep going on some more examples of hearing the scriptures, depending on how you guys feel. Are there any questions anybody want to ask? Otherwise, I'll keep going. Keep going? Okay. All right. So, in Luke 11, okay, Jesus, who has now got a really good ministry going by this stage, okay, he is beating every single demon that he beats. There is not one sickness he cannot overcome. Okay, he has empowered his disciples. He has sent them out 2 by 2. The ministry is growing. He has an incredible medical plan. All right? Okay, and he's really good at providing food, is he not? Okay, it's lunchtime, Jesus. What's up? What have you got? I brought fish. Here, he's casting out demons. So Luke 11:14. And it says, now he was casting out a demon that was mute. Now, in the ancient world, it is the Jewish people who were fighting the demons first. They engaged in spiritual warfare way before the first Christians. Okay? And they had a very old tradition, and they learnt it from a guy called Solomon. Solomon was the wisest of men. So he wrote a book, which is not in our Bibles. He wrote How You Cast Out Demons. Okay, that's not exactly the exact title. Okay, it's called Sefer HaRazim in Hebrew, and it's got some other stuff. So the first little bits are probably him, but he was known as the demon slayer. He would capture demons and imprison them, and the Muslims picked up on this idea. Right? Islam is a syncretic religion, right? Which means that it hears what you're doing and goes, fantastic, that's mine now, right? And so they actually, if you go to the Temple Mountain, you can go to a little dome. It's just next to the Dome of the Rock. Okay, it's a little dome. And it's called the Well of the Djinn. And you go, what's down there? And they say, that's where Solomon threw all the demons. And you go, wow, where did you guys hear that story? And so there's this tradition. However, there was one demon that they couldn't beat. And it was demons that were mute. Because part of the trick of bringing a demon out of someone was getting it to tell you its name. But a mute demon can't do that. And so they were like lost causes. However, it was the sign of the Messiah. When the Messiah comes, he will be able to do this. One of the signs of the Messiah was to to bring out mute demons. Remember this, the disciples can't call the demon out. And they say, well, why can't we do it? We can do these other guys. We can't get this one. And he says, oh, this comes out slightly differently. So there was this rites of exorcism. Just so you know that the Catholic Church still carries that tradition. Okay, so do the Orthodox. So in every single Catholic or Greek Orthodox diocese, one person has to be an exorcist. That's why when you call for an exorcist, they're always Catholics. You pick up the phone and say, I need an exorcist. It is not the Pentecostal guy from the church of, whatever. Okay? It's going to be a Catholic because they're holding on to this tradition. Anyway, Jesus has cast out demons who are mute. That means he should be the Messiah. Instead, when the demon had gone, the mute man spoke, and the people were amazed. They're like, wow. But some of them say, oh, but he casts out demons by Baal-Zevul, the prince of demons. Baal-Zevul is not the name of Satan. What's his real name? Lucifer. That's the Latin name. You're absolutely right. Lucifer is the Latin of the Hebrew, Chayil ben Shachar, which translates as the bright star of the morning, or the son of the dawn, okay? Or in English, morning star, right? Or in Latin, Lucifer, okay? So that's his name. However, the Jewish people didn't call him that. They called him all kinds of names. They called him Belial, yokeless one, because he's thrown off the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. They also called him Baal-Zevul. Baal meaning Lord, Zevul, fly. Flies hang around death. He is the antithesis of God, who is life. So that's what they gave him his name. So they're saying to Jesus, you cast out demons because you're inhabited by the prince of demons. Right? That's how you can do this. And others kept testing him, asking him to seek a sign from heaven. But he, knowing their thoughts, said to them, every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and a house divided will fall. If Satan is also divided against himself, because Satan in Hebrew means the enemy, right? It means the adversary. That's all it means. It's like his job description, not his real name. You say I cast out demons by Baal-Zevul, and if I cast out demons by Baal-Zevul, to whom do your sons cast them out? Who do your sons cast them out? Jesus is admitting that non-believing Jews can cast out demons. Right? They've been doing it for centuries. But if it is by the finger of God that I cast out demons, then the kingdom of heaven has come to you. Now the term finger of God in Hebrew is etzba Adonai. That's the term. Etzba, finger, Adonai Hashem, the finger of God. That phrase, etzba Adonai, only occurs twice in the entire Bible. Okay, so if you hear it, it's Ba Adonai, you only have two places to run back to. Does anyone know where the finger of God occurs in the Bible? Everybody says Daniel. Okay, yeah, it's not actually, that's a hand. Yes, one of them is God writes the Torah by the Etzba Adonai, the finger of God. So something writes the Torah, the finger of God, in one other place. Same book, that's Exodus. Correct, the magicians of Egypt. Remember, the magicians could do the first two miracles. Right? Magic is real. It's forbidden, but it is real. And the magicians could do it. They could do two. But when they got to the third one, they knew that they were actually fighting something far beyond their skills. So they said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. And so the finger of God is the miracle worker who did the Passover and the plagues, and he is also the writer of the Bible itself. So what has Jesus just said? You tell me I cast out demons by the Lord demon himself, but I tell you I cast out demons. Why? Because of the finger of God. What have they just heard? Jesus says, I'm the guy that smashed Egypt. That's what a plague is. A plague is a makah, which is a punch. It's the 10 punches where God punches Egypt. Okay, and he goes, and I wrote the Bible. Right? No wonder they wanted to throw him off a cliff. Okay? Because they go, whoa, that's blasphemy. Right? But so Jesus, he's actually telling us who he is, and the way he does it is in very Jewish ways, and it's usually on like a word or two that people hear. But when they hear it, they go, whoa, I know what you just said. And so they will wrestle with that one. All right. How are we doing for time? Any questions? I lived in Israel for 26 years in Jerusalem. I lived in a suburb called Gilo, which is a southern suburb. Half of it's a mountain. It's the tallest mountain in Jerusalem, so it has the best view, which is not why I lived out there. Okay, it's cheap because half of the mountain is inside Israel and half of it's beyond what's called the Green Line. So it's a contentious village. So it's all in Israel, but the United Nations will say, those guys are settlers. So I lived there. And it's also where Hezekiah built his summer palace. So Hezekiah built a place called Gilo, and when you walk around the neighborhood, you'll see old ancient wine presses that are 2,500 years old. You'll see columbariums where they kept all the pigeons. Yeah, things like that. So you see these old houses with columbariums, and you go, wow, this was I told my kids, I said, this is the SMS of the day, right? This is the WhatsApp, okay? And they didn't get it. But anyway, so that was where I lived, but I've taken up the role of director of the mission in the United Kingdom. So I'm now living in sunny Nottingham, which is the other Mount Zion. All right. So my son's a citizen, and he still has to go back. He's with me at the moment, but he has to return because he is called back to the army in December to be stationed in Syria. So you know how the Israelis have moved into the southern part of Syria, and now the Druze villages there are asking to stay inside Israel. They did that publicly when they first got there, but now they've been very quiet about it because it's a contentious issue, right? So, but the IDF has said, okay, we're staying, so they're going to have to rotate their soldiers, and the ones that are there now, they'll be rotated out, and then Micah and his unit will go in and defend them. So. Yes, we do, and we call it engage. Our society has three aims. We engage with Jewish people, which is, hello, we think Yeshua, Jesus, is the Messiah. If they say, no, we don't think so, okay. Is our relationship based on the fact that you have to believe the same thing as me? Because if that's true, most of us haven't got lots of friends, have we? So we say, I will still engage with you. Right? I believe that Yeshua is the Messiah, and it's because he's the Messiah I love you so much. It's because Jesus is the Messiah, I know I've got a debt that I've got to pay back to you. And so I will defend you against anti-Semitism. My son will get a gun and fight for you, and I'll pray for you, and etc., etc., etc. So that's what we do. We engage with Jewish people. We also educate the church. So we challenge the church. We say, hey, do you know that the Bible you're reading is actually a Jewish book? It's written by Jews, about Jews, predominantly to Jews, and you probably should read it in context. So that's what we do. And we also then do what's called encouragement. Once Jews or Arabs, because lots of Arabs also come to faith in the Messiah, once that happens, then they need a whole lot of new friends. So we need to help them maintain the faith. We need to help them learn. We need to help them connect with each other, especially as they start forming their own congregations and stuff like that. Just because you've now come to faith in Jesus does not mean you know how to say Shandalamanda Haba Mahanda. Okay? Most people use the prayer books and things like that. So that's what we do. We also run a new thing online called Asaf. And that's for Jewish, inside the church, there's lots of Jews. Did you know that? A lot of Jewish Christians, a lot of Jewish believers. And that's whether it's marriage, whether they're born into a Christian family who was actually Jewish and no one told them, etc., etc. And now when they identify, wow, I'm actually Jewish, then it becomes a struggle. Because if you're an Arab Christian and you become a member of the church, in 2 generations, your children still identify as Arabs. If you're Chinese, after 2 generations, your kids still identify as Chinese. Why don't Jews do that? Why is it that when Jews come to faith in Jesus, after a couple of generations, their kids no longer identify as Jews? What have we done to take that away? If Israel is meant to be a light to the nations and they keep assimilating like that, how can they be a light to the nations? And so we've created a group where we say, no, guys, you get together and you talk and you share and you let the Holy Spirit work, but you talk and you share and you figure out how to rekindle that spark within yourselves. I'm not saying leave the church. They love it. They love their church family. They love their friends. They love praying. They love going and worshiping God. Of course they do, and they should. But they should also be reminded that once Jewish, always Jewish. All right, that's our mission. Yeah, that's right. Practices? Yeah. So I study with rabbis twice a week, and I've been doing that for 17 years. Oh, you can? Yeah. And so, and they know that I'm a believer. And you might ask, how did that happen? When I moved into my apartment, everybody lives in buildings. And you all have to go to a little committee called the Va'ad Bait. Each building all the residents have to pay every month some money to cover the cost of electricity for outside, the gardener, that kind of stuff. There's always people in the building who don't pay. Always. Even though it's the law. Okay? So I go to this meeting, I'm looking around, everyone's arguing, and when they all leave, then there's this little man called Mordecai, he's a rabbi, and I see him pull out money, and he's paying for everybody who didn't pay. So I go over to him and I say, hey, Mordecai, do you mind writing down a list of everybody who lives in this building and how much they owe? And he goes, okay. So he writes it all down. Thank you. So I go back to my apartment. Now, I'm an Anglican deacon, okay? So I was ordained by the Bishop of Bolivia. Another story. So I put on my white alb and my cincture and a chasuble and a stole and a massive pictorial cross, and I knock on everybody's door and I go, hello, my name's Aaron, and if you don't want me to dress like this and come knock every day, this is how much you pay. And they wrote all these checks, take everything back off, go back to Mordecai, and I go, here you go. And he goes, what did you do? And I said, I put the fear of God into Mordecai. And so we became firm friends. He then said, can you come to a study? I'll do a little shiur. And I said, yeah, I'd love to, but I'm a believer. And he goes, we would love to have your input. And I learned so much, right, about the Bible and the scriptures, and wrestled. And rabbis do come to faith. And they're still rabbis. And that's okay, is it not? Okay, so I brought a Chabad rabbi to faith, and whose name happens to also be Mordecai. You've met him. And when he came to faith, he thought he was Superman. He was going to go save the entire Jewish race. Okay, so he wandered off into the Meir Sharim Yeshiva, the biggest one called Mir. It's got 6,000 students, and he brought all these Yiddish New Testaments. He sat down, he spread them all out, and says, right, guys, we're going to have a study. And they beat the crap out of him. And he comes back and he goes, why won't they learn? He's like, they will. Just drop at a time, okay? Just go slow. And so it's all good news. It's not bad news. So, all right. So it depends on which tradition you're coming from. So the Jewish world is not homogeneous, right? It's very diverse. And so you've got lots of different streams of Judaism, and ranging from ultra-Orthodox all the way through to sort of, well, they don't have Reform in Israel. They got something else, like Reform. It's sort of like, do you believe in God? Yeah, no. But I'll study the Bible anyway. Why? It's my job. You sound like a university professor. And so they do it differently. And unfortunately, one of the ways they do it is with drugs. Yeah, so you can go to Tzfat up in the north, and you can go study Kabbalah, and you will do it very much inebriated, okay? And they'll come up with some wild stuff, okay? That, I mean, just to hear this, you know, God made skin to cover Adam and Eve. What animal did he use? A unicorn. No more drugs for that rabbi. So that's what happens. They meditate. Well, when we understand the word meditate isn't. Meditate is ponder, wrestle, study, look. So, like when we go and study, when I study with my rabbi friends, we'll go for 1 hour verses. That's right. That's an intense Bible study. Right, that's like just pulling it apart, left, right, up, down. I mean, this was like this. One day, we're studying Chronicles, and we're talking about King David saying to his soldiers, "Hey, I remember the Philistines have captured Bethlehem. I remember there was a well when I was growing up in Bethlehem, had sweet water in there. Gee, I'd like some." And 3 of his soldiers sneak through enemy lines, and they grab the water for him, and they sneak back, and they give it to him and say, "Here you are, boss." And he gets the water, and he goes, "I can't drink this. You guys risked your lives for it." So he pours it out on the ground, right? And as soon as he did that, whoa, all these rabbis threw their hands up. He goes, "Yeah, he can't do that. You know, you can't offer water libation to God. Nowhere do you offer water to God. You can only offer wine. He must have turned water to wine, and he can't do that. He can't be a priest. He's a king. Gee, he must be a king priest." And then they looked at me and they went, "Didn't one of your boys turn water into wine?" And I went, "Yeah, one of your boys did turn water into wine." Okay? So they find things like that into the most bizarrest places. So you can have a really anyway. Okay. Yitzhak could. I met one of his students. Okay. In fact, I went across Canada with him. Okay. The student's name is a guy called David Sinai, who was a gemologist. Okay. He made diamonds. Okay. He made chunks of money. Secular Jew, Persian. Okay. Girlfriend goes off with his friend. So he's devastated. He's rich, but he's empty. So he gives everything away, goes off to India to become a guru or whatever. He's growing a beard and living in a loincloth. But everywhere he goes, he can't find the truth. And so when he's at his wit's end, he says, "Lord, if you're actually there, will you please come and reveal yourself?" And so something came into his room. And he goes, "Okay, God is here." And he's in India, and he walks out the front door, and on the floor is a New Testament in Hebrew. So he picks it up and he goes, "Wow." But when he went back to Israel, he joined this guy's group. Why? Because he was a mystic. And David said that you'd be studying with him, and sometimes he would just like stare into space. And then he would come back, and people would say, "What have you been doing?" He goes, "I've seen the Messiah." And they go, "Well, who is it?" And he goes, "Well, you're not going to like it." So I'll write it on a piece of paper, but you can only open it 1 year after I'm dead. And of course, what did they do? It was Jesus, Yeshua, and his family disowned him and stuff like that. So God is doing some amazing things with his people. And when David came to faith, I happened to ask him, "So what date was it?" And he told me the dates, and I went away and looked at the parasha, the Torah portion for his day. And it was Deuteronomy 4, which says, when you seek me with all your heart, you will find me. And I said, it'll happen. If you do this, this is a promise. It will happen. So that's a good thing. Yeah, that's us. He doesn't do it because believing in him is going to actually cause pain. But now people are brokenhearted, and so who needs to bind them up? Yeah, we do. So does that make sense? I mean, he is the ultimate guy who binds up the brokenhearted, but the reason he leaves it out is the reason we need to study it.